If you're not willing to kind of do the thing in obscurity for 5 to 10 years before it takes off, then maybe that's just not the thing that you should be focused on at all. And I'm just trying to keep coming back to that and not expect things to take off immediately and just keep working hard at them, doing the best I can to get that compounding going, but also having the patience and the confidence that sticking with it for a long time will bring those results.
That is today's guest, Nat Eliason, a published and self-published author whose work I very much enjoy. His new sci-fi novel, Husk, is out now. Nat is also an extremely intelligent entrepreneur. He always seems to be ahead of the curve. And the reality is, whether you are an employee or an entrepreneur, perhaps somebody growing a location-independent business, you want to know what you can do to make yourself or your creative work stand out. You're going to hear today how Nat used social media to outperform his almost 50,000 person newsletter, an honest discussion about balancing artistic integrity with business necessity, some counterintuitive advice around starting something before you are ready. We all need to hear that. Insights on the creator economy, how to avoid the quote unquote preparation trap that keeps people from pursuing their dreams, and loads more. It's all happening in this episode right now. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here. And welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. And we're doing a different kind of traveling today. We're doing a bit of time traveling when we discuss Nat's new book, Husk. And as you heard at the top, plenty of other stuff coming your way. You know, the subtitle of his book is a post-apocalyptic techno thriller. He had me at post-apocalyptic. I love sci-fi books. I'm a bit of a sci-fi nerd, and yeah, I'm a sucker for post-apocalyptic things. I don't know. Are we living in a post-apocalyptic age right now? I'm not here to answer that question. I prefer anything post-apocalyptic to happen in the fictional world. Anyway, that aside, I want you to stick around on the back end if you have time. I have just rediscovered one of the best ways to see your town or your city in a whole new light with fresh eyes. And this is a fun one. Stick around for that. I'll leave you with a quote to wrap this one up as well. And don't forget, we have a free newsletter over at zerototravel.com/newsletter. If you like a curated list that involves, travel, life stuff, anything that can really help you see the world on your terms and improve your life in some way and introduce you to new concepts and perspectives. That's what we curate and collect and share on the newsletter and that community over there. All the stuff you love about the podcast, I'm sure, in newsletter form coming at you, and that's free. So sign up over at zerototravel.com/newsletter. For now, please enjoy my conversation with Nat, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend. Cheers. Nat Eliason, welcome back to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend, and good morning.
Good morning. Good to be back.
It's been 8 years since you first came on the podcast, actually. Almost 8 years. I looked it up before we started recording. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It feels like forever. It's like a whole lifetime ago.
We're an old man.
Yeah. Especially for two dads, I guess. I was like 3 kids for, well, at least for you, I think. How old's your oldest child now?
She'll be 4 in October.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of people wondering out there how you get any writing done with small kids around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that I can do it during my work hours. I think that if I couldn't do it during work hours, then it would get a lot more complicated. But it's basically like the morning routine is dropping them at preschool, and then I try to be at the coffee shop ready to go right at 9. And then I usually write from like 9 to noon most weekdays.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I wanted to say thanks because since that first appearance on the pod, I have been following your newsletter and your work, and I think your newsletter I get a ton of value out of and have for many years. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And now you have this book, which I just finished, Husk, book 1 of the Meru Initiative. Would I pronounce that?
Meru.
Meru, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm a sci-fi fan, so when you came out with this book and you were kind of doing the pre-launch thing, which we'll talk about because I want to get some launch strategies with you and talk about self-publishing versus traditional publishing and writing and all that good stuff. I don't know about you, man. What freaks me out right now about sci-fi, I've just started the new Black Mirror season. I just finished your book, is that it used to feel like, yeah, this is like so far-fetched, but what a great story. And now it's just like, okay, this is either going to happen really soon.
This is all starting to feel a little more real. Yeah.
It's just feeling so real, man. Like the most outlandish things feel like they're not that far off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's always been this kind of, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could break down sci-fi, but there have kind of always been these two camps where one was like the near future speculative camp, right? Like there's this emerging technology and here's something that could happen if we extrapolate this another couple decades. And Michael Crichton's probably the master of like that, side of the genre, because all of his books were pretty near future or even in the present, right? Like Jurassic Park was written almost as if it could have been happening when it came out. There's no like crazy computers or anything like that. And even the really speculative ones like Timeline, it still felt like they were grounded in the present, but just with a little time travel thrown in. And then you have the whole like space opera, like far future intergalactic civilization side of the genre. And that side of it has always just like interested me less from a writing perspective. I really love the more near term, like here is this thing that's emerging, like what might happen if we take this seriously or it goes wrong, or what could be some unintended consequences if this side of science gets like really out of control. Those have always just been really fun to me. And I feel like there's just so much fertile ground for that now. It kind of feels like the last 20 years we had, maybe even like longer than 20 years. Basically, like since we stopped like increasing the amount of energy we produce ish in the 70s, 80s per capita, like we kind of like fell off the dramatic increase in energy that everybody had available to like once we abandoned nuclear for a while. And now that kind of like curve is starting to pick up again. And so all of these things are becoming possible. Or becoming like interesting, or getting into building cool hardware tech again. It just feels like there's a lot of science stuff to explore and be excited about that's coming in the near future that we didn't have as much to be excited about the last 20 years when we were focused on like miniaturization and software.
Yeah. Yeah. The near term stuff feels like, the message in the side view mirror of your car, like objects are closer than they appear.
Totally.
I feel like that's where the near-term stuff is going in sci-fi. Well, you can give us sort of the 101 on the book without spoiling it. If you're a fan of sci-fi, I do encourage you to read it. And I'm excited that this is book 1. And I wanted to dig into the idea and some of the influences and where the idea came from, because I haven't really had the opportunity to discuss fiction writing too much through the pot, mostly nonfiction stuff, and we're talking travel and everything like that. But this is like you've constructed a whole world here, and I want to hear about the ideas, the influences, and also the process of like tying a world like that together. Because I honestly like can't get my head around it from a creative perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still figuring it out. It's hard. It's way harder than it's kind of like we don't do these things because they're easy. We do them because we thought they were easy. And so I definitely didn't like know exactly what I was getting myself into when I took this on, and so it's been a very fun learning process and trying to figure that out as I go. I mean, the idea for Husk and for the world was basically there's been a lot of this discussion around AI and computing that we might be able to achieve a form of functional immortality, right? That the computers could advance to a point where we could eventually we could definitely at least simulate our consciousness on a computer where you have a kind of digital twin, but there may even be some way to transfer our consciousness, to literally transcend our bodies and move into the machines and have this kind of like functional immortality in server space. It raises all these interesting questions around like philosophy of mind, nature of consciousness, mind-body dualism, the immortal soul, right? There's like this whole religious element to it. And it's just a topic that I've been interested in for a very long time. And, I don't exactly remember where, when, or why I had this idea, but I was just kind of thinking about it as a possible premise for a sci-fi novel. And then I had the thought that, well, assuming we did figure it out, assuming we did pull it off, and we did achieve immortality through transferring into machines, we'd probably never want everyone to do it. There would need to be like at least some people on the outside to fix the machines if something went wrong. Like, yes, robots could do a lot of it. You have a lot of automated processes, but if there were a solar flare or some sort of big power grid failure, like there would need to be human redundancy on the outside. Like we could never have everybody living in this digital immortality. So what does that world look like, right? Like what kind of a situation is it when 99.99% or whatever of all humans are living in digital paradise, and then you have this much smaller outside population who are like somewhere between, just like working to earn their keep so that they can be in this digital paradise eventually, or kind of like a quasi-slave population, right? Because you can imagine how they would eventually see themselves that way. And so what does that relationship look like? And, how does it break down, or what threats to it are there? And that kind of like planted the seed for what became this whole world. So, in the world of Husk, there's been this kind of awful plague around the year 2035 that wipes out the vast majority of humanity. And around the same time, we actually solve this problem. We solve the transference problem. And so it gets offered to the world as a way to escape the plague. You can transfer your mind into this digital paradise, Meru, and live in basically servers, but you can't die. There's no scarcity, right? Like paradise. And then the people who survive the plague or are resistant to it agree to stay behind and help keep the servers running so that, society can continue as best it can until we can kind of like repopulate once the plague is passed. And so that happens. And then the book picks up about 100 years after that, where this has been going on for quite a while. And now Meru's under threat, basically. Somebody's trying to destroy it. And the protagonist, Isaac, gets kind of thrust into the middle of it and has to figure out what's going on, why this is happening. There's a lot of fun stuff to work with there, right? So there's obviously this whole Isaac plot that starts with Husk and, the people who are trying to destroy Meru and what's going on with that. But there's also kind of like everything leading up to it and everything that happened, in between for those 100 years. And kind of as you alluded to, it started as this small idea, but the world just kind of like keeps growing. And there are all these interesting characters who are parts of it or who had parts in it, and like kind of all of their stories and their contributions. And, the Husk takes place in this one smaller part of the world, but there's obviously like all these other things going on around the world in the situation. So it's just like very fun and almost overwhelming at times to think about like, here's everything I can do with this now that I kind of like have it started and can see like, how big can this snowball get?
Yeah, I like that you geographically kept it close to home in Austin as well.
Yeah. Well, that was a fun thing. There were all these kind of like fun things that I thought about as I was writing it where, typically if you had a story like this where pioneering scientist solves some, has some major breakthrough and, figures out something incredible like transference technology, you would set it in Cambridge or New York or San Francisco, right? Like those, maybe Chicago if you're feeling frisky, like those would be the cities where that happened. And so I in the original version, it was in San Francisco. And then I thought about it some more. I was like, you know what? There's so much tech happening in Austin and, the greater like Texas Triangle area. I was like, I could just set it here. Like this will be fun. And like, I haven't really read another sci-fi book like this set in Texas. It's always set on the coast. And so there were just kind of like fun things like that I got to include too. And so I literally, there's a decent geographic element to it. And so I've had to like map out most of central Texas, how it's going to look in 100 years in this world and what those like cities, tech centers, broken down towns and things actually look like, which is kind of a fun thing too, right? You get to think about the world around me in 100 years in this fictional universe.
Yeah. Maybe an excuse to like screw off from the writing for the day, just be like, I gotta drive out to the middle of nowhere, Austin, and just, really take in the landscape. I like
Totally.
I like the writer's version of Frisky, setting it in Chicago. You're like, if you're feeling frisky,
feel frisky. Yeah, exactly. Well, that was like Dark Matter, right, by Blake Crouch.
Yeah,
another wonderful novel. And he said that one in Chicago, and he said he did it because he just like took a trip to Chicago while he was thinking about the book and just fell in love with the city. And so it was an excuse for him to learn more about Chicago, which I think is kind of a fun way to do it. I have an idea for a novella or an offshoot of Husk about like some of the people who rejected the transfer technology, rejected the immortality, but they needed to find a part of the world that was free of the disease where they could live. And for reasons that will become obvious in a much later book, Patagonia in Argentina would be one of the areas that would be immune to it. And so I was like, well, I might like have to go to Patagonia and travel around for like a week so that I can accurately write about what it would be like living here.
I, as a guy who has spent about 3.5 months in the Patagonia area, I would say big thumbs up to that. Would highly recommend it. Yeah, it's fantastic.
I should just ask you where I should set each of the subsequent books, and that can be like my travel schedule.
Hey man, I'd love to be a part of the world. No, I don't know. I know you see you got like a gray background there, but for some reason in my head I imagine like the scenes in the detective films where they have like maps and pictures pointed up and like threaded, like string, like going from one. That's kind of how I imagine like it's going on in your office, but maybe not.
I mean, it feels that way because
in your head,
in my head, certainly. And in all of my documents, it's actually, so it's literally on my tasks for the next week and a half to sit down and finally like get all of those details on paper, because I finished Husk. Husk comes out end of May. And then I started writing a novella. And the novella is in the same universe, but it takes place 100 years before the events of Husk. So it's the novella is basically the day transference gets solved. What's going on that day and what does it look like when, this major character Felix has this huge breakthrough and, is able to show the world that he's created this technology. And, that's been really, really fun. But I'm already starting to run into these questions where like, I'm forgetting details, right? Like I'm forgetting exactly where I said something happened or exactly when something happened or exactly who said what, especially because as you edit, you change things. And so, sometimes I'm like, was that in an earlier edit or was that in the final? And so I literally need to go back and reread Husk, make sure I have every detail down accurately and start building out my own personal wiki for all of this stuff so that I make sure I don't mess up any details or continuity or anything like that. Sanderson apparently has a full-time employee whose whole job is this.
Oh, really?
Which is really cool. Yeah. That's like a That's on my nerdy goals, like future aspirations, right? To have somebody who is on your payroll, whose whole job it is to maintain the wiki of your universes. Like,
Right.
That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. What else is on that nerdy aspirations list? Is that the title of the list? It's an official Notion document.
Official Notion document, nerdy aspirations. I want a warehouse. Like I'm getting most of these from Sanderson. Like I want a warehouse full of my books that I'm shipping out from. I mean, that would just be cool, Like a warehouse, maybe 30 minutes outside Austin towards Bastrop or something with like a desk in the corner. And so kind of like when you see the pictures from, Varda or Astronis or any of these new space tech companies where a lot of the people are working in the warehouses in the machine shops. And so you've got like the people at their desks on one side, and then you have just like a rocket part hanging from the ceiling on the other side. I want that, but like it's my desk over here and then just pallets and pallets of books behind me.
Yeah. Nice. I love that visual imagery. How do you balance that in your own head? Like the joy of the pursuit and the joy in the journey of writing a novel and the day to day versus the, let's call them like bigger goals, which we all have. And I feel like this is also can be a very much like a Western mindset type thing, like always striving for more and hedonic treadmill and those kinds of ideas. I even like this morning, I was just thinking like, just be present today, man. Like that's like a struggle for me sometimes. So yeah. How do you balance that personally?
It's a tough question because like on the one hand, what I'm doing, focusing on fiction writing is romantic and very fun and very rewarding in and of itself. And I'm doing it with the goal for it to be the main moneymaker, like the main business. I'm not treating it like a side thing or like a hobby. It's like, I want this to be the thing.
You're all in.
And I'm really all in on it. And it's like, you almost can't pick a harder industry to go all in on. It's like, the number of people who never make a living wage from writing is like, 99.99% or whatever. But on the other side of that, the people who really figure it out and really do, it's one of the most lucrative solo careers in the world. You'd have a hard time finding any other job where you can sit in a cabin in Maine and write for 6 to 9 months of the year and get sent like a $5 million check every year, right? But like that's been Stephen King's life for decades. And there's people who are not Stephen King, below that, who have these incredibly successful careers writing fiction. And it is like a but it is a uniquely solo enterprise, especially distinct from nonfiction, where nonfiction, you're going to often have this other like business apparatus around it. You're going to have courses and speaking and consulting and like all these other things that go with the nonfiction book. Whereas fiction is a lot of the money is coming from the book and the merch and, the movie rights and all the things that are downstream of the book itself. So it requires both that romantic joy, that fascination with craft, all of those things, and a pretty like brutal business sense. You've got to take the business side extremely seriously. And honestly, one of the things that's been hard the last year. So I finished Crypto Confidential a little over a year ago. It came out last July. And I started working on Husk as I finished Crypto Confidential. So Husk has been a little over a year in the making. And one of the hard things about it has been that with nonfiction, there is this strong like pre-marketing element. You're building an audience for a topic, right? You've got the podcast and YouTube videos and the newsletter and all these things about the topic. And then you launch the book about the topic and people buy the book because they already see you as an authority on the topic. With fiction writing, you don't really have that same thing because people are buying a fiction book for the story and the experience of reading it, not like, Nat writes a lot about crypto, and so I'll buy his crypto book. It's like people will only buy it if they hear that it's good. Some people are going to trust me from my newsletter and stuff and buy it, but it only succeeds through that like word of mouth marketing and all of that. And so there's only so much marketing you can do on the front end for a novel. You like kind of have to wait until it's out, and then it's starting to get reviews and starting to get word of mouth. And then you slowly become able to do more and more things. And really, once you have 2 or 3 or 4, that the things you can do really start to increase, because like your ads get a lot more efficient if somebody can go buy Husk 1, 2, and 3 and not just Husk 1, right? Like the LTV of a customer gets a lot higher. So part of it is just like being patient and focusing on the product itself for the first few years, and then slowly figuring out how to add more of the business layers on top of it. And so I'm actually really excited to have it out and to be able to start monkeying with Amazon ads and, giving away free chapters or whatever, or getting to talk to more podcasts and Instagrammers and things in the book space. And I felt a little like, the horse in the paddock, kind of like butting against the gate, ready to go, but being a little, somewhat constrained by not having the book out in the world yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. That must be, it's an interesting time for you with this first one, because you do have the business brain also. So it's like you just laid out, you have to be patient, but not necessarily the game you're used to playing, let's say.
Totally. and it's a different beast, like reaching out to podcasts and stuff too, because obviously it's like, we're here and we've known each other for a really long time. And so, actually I think you reached out to me, but I had you towards the top of my list of people to reach out to about the book. But like, I don't know hardly any of the like fiction podcasters, and it doesn't necessarily give me an in that I have an email list or that I have a large Instagram, because at the end of the day, their reputation is based on recommending good books to their audience and having on authors whose books their audience has read. And so my pitch isn't as easy as it was for my newsletter or for Crypto Confidential. And so it's a little bit of a like humbling or like restarting experience, which I'm also kind of enjoying. It's like the thing that I will have to go on is the quality of the book, and my audience and all of that is going to be a bonus. But at the end of the day, if the books aren't good, I'm never going to like get on these people's radar. And so it's been fun to kind of like really focus on that too.
Yeah, it's just like a back to the roots of just focusing on the craft, I guess, and just like you said, the product. I'm going to plug one of your other things really quick for you because I just signed up for you have this new course now, build your own apps with AI, which is fun for me because I don't know jack about coding. And so it's been quite interesting. I'm just,
you do now.
Well, I'm getting there. Actually, I'm not getting there yet, but I'm going to be getting there. But no, I'm just bringing that up because that's an example of what you just laid out, where it's like, a nonfiction. This is not writing, but a course bought by from somebody I trust, who I know understands coding, understands technology, is smart. Like, I bought this course because you made it, right? But with fiction books, some of them I couldn't even remember who the author is, even though it was like an incredible book. And that does happen. There are certain authors that I follow that I know, and then you get to know them over time, perhaps. But there's definitely been books that I've read that, like, oh, that was a great story, but who wrote it? It's almost like it doesn't even. It matters in the sense like it matters to them in their life, and I'm glad I'm supporting their work and giving them a review or whatever. But it doesn't matter for, like you said, for this they're buying it for the story. They're not buying it for the name on the book until you get to a certain point where you're like, oh, I know this guy writes awesome stories, or this gal writes awesome stories, so I'm gonna buy whatever they write.
Yeah, and it's really this big, slow compounding game. And that's an adjustment for me too, coming from the internet marketing, internet products world, where you can, really blow up through a newsletter or whatnot very quickly. And, you might have a course business or a YouTube or something like that really takes off quite fast. And that's exceptionally hard and uncommon in the fiction world. The much more common story is that you publish for 5 or 10 years, and those early trickles of interest grow, and sort of like each book increases your word of mouth. And then, over that 5, 10, 20 years, then it really starts to build into this big, valuable body of work, right? Like Sanderson has really become a household name in the last 3, 4 years. I'd say especially the last 2 is when he's really had that like crazy come up after the Kickstarter. But his first book came out 20 years ago. And he said his first book sold like 4,000 copies, right? Which is fine. It's decent. It's good for, a debut fiction novel, but it's nothing, obviously. It's not even a rounding error on what he does now. And so you really have to have that patience, which has been this whole other process for me too, because I'm not a very patient person. And I feel like my patience has been ruined even further by the success you can have at some of these online things too. And so that's been a bit of a good retraining.
Yeah. Well, I do want to dive back into the fiction world in a minute, but since we're talking, you were mentioning kind of being able to blow up with a newsletter. Like I know you're doing very well with this course. I can just see from the numbers of people in it and everything like that. You seem to always be able to, yes, I mean, it's the consistent writing, and you've played the long game and putting out valuable content and building up your newsletter. And I think your subscriber base is over like 40,000 people now or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, about 47.
So you have that to work with, of course, but you've earned it. But even with the launch of this book, because I'm on the list, so I've been following the launch from like a meta perspective and the course and everything like that. You seem to be able to adapt to the environment of what we call it. We want to call it the internet marketing environment. I don't even know. Like I think back to like the old days of like the yellow highlighted copy and the red.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, those long form, like
super long sales pages.
Yeah, just like that. And I mean, like things change, and I know there are people out there listening that, this is a valuable skill for anybody, like being able to like build up an audience, even if, like you said, they might not buy a fiction book from you, like your audience, because they're not following you necessarily for that. But it never hurts to have sort of like an audience or a community built up. But what does that look like in this day and age? Like, how do you do that when there's so much noise? And I know this is a big question and you can't answer it for everybody, but yeah, I just want to get your sort of take on that right now. Like, would you call it the creator economy? I don't even know.
Yeah, I guess you'd call it the creator economy. I know, like, I hate that word, but
I know it's just, yeah.
You and I both have the benefit of like having done this so long that I feel like we can see some of the arcs of things. I started my first blog in 2012. It was 2012 or 2013. So it's been like 12 years that I've been doing this, and have really seen these different trends come and go over that time period. In 2015, my friend Justin and I launched an email course, and that was to upsell to a paid course, not dissimilar to some of the self-paced paid courses that you see today. But when we did that, an email course was such a novel thing. We were really only the like third or fourth big email course to come out. There had been one or two before that, and it was such a new and exciting thing that we posted it on Product Hunt, and we were like the number 3 product hunt of the day. And I mean, to think about that now is just so ridiculous, because you have incredibly legitimate businesses posting on Product Hunt every day, these incredible new AI tools and, mobile apps and defense tech companies, whatever, showing up on Product Hunt. And we were an email course teaching you how to like automate parts of your marketing using basic JavaScript and stuff. And front page of Product Hunt got like 3,000 or 4,000 email subscribers, I want to say, off of that Product Hunt listing. And that kind of like really kicked off that little course business for us. And you can't really do that anymore because everybody and their mother has an email course. Everybody has an email newsletter. They're not exciting. People are, I would say, like pretty tired of email for the most part. And so, that strategy's had to adapt. There was a time when you could have like a huge Facebook page. You had all these people who invested tons and tons of money and time and energy into building up their Facebook page. And then Facebook just kind of turned it off. And they said, oh, you've got to buy ads to reach your own audience now. You used to be able to post links on X and elsewhere and to like drive traffic from those networks back to your site. And you can't do that anymore, right? Like SEO via Google, that was my main business for almost 5 years. That used to be like the main way people found things, and they kind of like don't find things that way nearly as much as they used to. And so you sort of have to always have your finger on the pulse of, one, how people are finding things, and then two, the best way to get in front of them, like wherever they are finding them, right? And I think that the big change we've seen over the last 5 years or so is away from this, what I would call like island strategy, where the whole strategy for a long time was to get people back to your website, get them back to your site, get them back to your blog, get them on your URL, because then you can get them to join your email list and get them to keep coming back to your site. And I think that world is kind of gone. I think people don't want to go to websites anymore. And they certainly go to them a lot less, because, 10 years ago when I went online, I was usually going to people's websites, right? Now when I go online, I'm going on Twitter or Substack or ChatGPT, and I'm not leaving those interfaces very often. And so you might almost be harming yourself by trying too hard to get people off of those platforms and onto your site. And you should instead be thinking about, how do I just directly reach people on the platform where they're already spending time, and not worry too much about getting them to subscribe in a different way than the way that they want to subscribe where they already are. And I think Substack has done a really good job of this, because they make it so easy to subscribe to newsletters, and they have multiple ways of delivering them to people who want to read them, right? They've got the Notes app where, or the Notes like Twitter competitor, where you can see, short posts from people as well as longer form articles. People can get notifications in the Substack app when you publish something new, and they can get it via email, right? Like, it's giving them a lot of options. And so while there is certainly an argument for having your own site and your own newsletter that's off of Substack, at the end of the day, people who want to read articles, which is significantly fewer people than it used to be, but it might actually net out to more, right? Like, because more people are online and reading now. But anyway, a lot of those people are on Substack. And people, I think, understand better what it means when you say, I have a Substack, than if you say, I have a newsletter. When I hear newsletter, I think you're going to sell something to me. And it used to be that a newsletter was just like articles and things. And then people realized how much money they could make off of newsletters. And it was really, really great up through 2019, 2020, 2021. And then like Morning Brew and The Hustle and The Skim and a lot of these really serious newsletters, for lack of a better term, kind of like destroyed the industry, because people subscribed to way too many of them. The whole recommendation game got overplayed. And now I think people are kind of like sick of their inbox being full of newsletters. And so you have to like meet people where they want to be, right? And so like I've invested a good amount of energy into Instagram, because the Instagram book community is really, really strong, right? People love getting book recommendations on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, honestly. But my goal is not to like get them onto a newsletter, because I know the conversion to that is going to be terrible. It's way better to just focus on building that audience natively there, and then try to sell directly on that platform. So just to give a more concrete example, when I launched Build Your Own Apps, when I launched it in January, it was really just because somebody was asking me to do it on Twitter. And, I pulled some people on Twitter and I was like, hey, does anybody want me to do this? And the response was really strong. And the old strategy would have been, okay, here's a link to my newsletter where I'm going to announce the course. Go sign up and you'll find out when it launches. That would be what most people would say. Like, that's how you do it. You get the email subscriber and then you convert them from an email subscriber to a buyer. I didn't do that. I just started putting the checkout link right on X. So I would talk about the course and then just post the buy link right below it. It was a $500 course, and I was sending people straight to the checkout, like no landing page. There wasn't a landing page at all. You know, we were talking about like the long copy, and there was nothing. It was literally just a cart link with some description on the cart page about what the course was. But the like landing page was all of my tweets. It was all of my posts on X about what the course was going to be, and then just a link to where people could buy it, which is very different from what the strategy was 5 years ago. But you know, just doing that on Twitter for a week, it did a little over $100,000 just from Twitter. It did more on Twitter than it did from the one email I sent to my newsletter. And that was really surprising to me. I was like, you can just kind of like post about something and like go crazy on X for a week or two. And you don't need to do the landing page or the long sales sequence at all anymore, because people are willing to just buy from where they're already hanging out. And that was a cool experiment to run. And it was really neat to see, even till today, I've sold more of the course from Twitter, from those posts, than I have from my big fancy like email funnel to get my newsletter subscribers to buy it. And like that's pretty cool. It's very different. So you just kind of got to be like willing to experiment with this stuff and not take these like best practices as set in stone, because it only becomes a best practice once a bunch of people have been doing it successfully for a few years. But if you wait until that, then you've probably missed out on some like blue ocean opportunity that's out there right now that you could get ahead of before it's entirely played out. So you kind of have to be looking for those things constantly.
So in that case, it's because you mentioned the Facebook example of building up the page and then they just took it away and you have to pay for them now. And I guess you're willing to take that risk on these because that's what you're giving up, right? If you're going to stay on the platform and meet them where they are, so to speak, then you're also taking the risk that the platform can change their mind and how they do things any given day. And that's just, but like, again, you're highlighting one recent example of a way you did something differently that hasn't really traditionally been done. Again, that could go away. But then to your point, I guess it's the big takeaway would be sort of the experimental mindset and kind of thinking, like when they zig, you zag type of thinking when you're looking at marketing.
A little bit. And I think remembering that your name is really the audience that you're building, in the sense of, you know, no matter which platform you're on, if you're tweeting or making YouTube videos or sending emails, what people are starting to recognize is your name. And so if something happens on a platform and you have to pivot, you will hopefully at least have your name as like a big up on the new platform or the new way of doing things that you can lean on. And I think this is part of what's cool about doing longer form content, like doing podcasts or articles or long YouTube videos, is you build a lot more rapport with your audience than you do from, say, like tweets or Instagram posts. And I'll still have, I'll have people tell me like, oh, I read this article of yours that, I wrote 6 years ago that had a big impact on them, but they still remember it because it's an article, right? It's got that longevity. And as long as you're focusing on stuff with good longevity, and as long as you're, kind of willing to try these new platforms out and figure out how they work, it's kind of a muscle. It's a skill that you can get better at. Like, you can get better at figuring out how the algorithms on these platforms work and then play them to your advantage, so that whenever the game changes, you feel, you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I just lost all of my audience because I don't have my Facebook page anymore. Instead, you feel like, oh, okay, I know that whatever the game is now, I can go figure it out and I can build an audience in the new place. And I don't have to be overly married to the way that I was doing things before. Like, if you can develop that skill, then it doesn't really matter how the like influence game changes, because you're going to be able to adapt to it.
It sounds like that is a yes vote for building a personal brand, but I'm just wondering, maybe a bit selfishly for myself because I'm launching a new company and a new project, but also for anybody listening out there, if you have the intention of building a business around a brand, of course, that's not you, but it's its own brand. Let's say you want to sell that business eventually, or you want to have an exit strategy. In that case, would you still, I mean, of course you want to grab the socials and things like that for that brand and own them, but would you focus because you can only maintain so much, right? Unless you have this huge team. And I think you and I are both more probably in solopreneur land in terms of mindset, at least, than, big sort of startup world where you're going to have hundreds of employees and things like that. You're trying to sort of bootstrap things. Yeah. What would your strategy be there? Like, where should people focus their efforts? Should they just focus their efforts on building up like them as an individual and then just keep launching projects under them? Or should they focus on building up like followings or communities or audiences or whatever you want to call it under X brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's a product brand, then it definitely makes sense for it to be under the product, right? Because as you said, if you want to be able to sell it someday, right, or you don't want to be the face of it anymore, you don't want to be locked into a situation where you can't leave, right? Like you can't extricate yourself because your face is, the core asset of the business, right? Like you kind of don't want that. But I think that, going back to the old island model, that idea that you only get on Instagram or Twitter or whatever to send traffic back to your site, and your site is where the main stuff is, like that world is kind of gone, right? And so I for me, I would almost be thinking like, okay, obviously have a really nice Shopify store and everything, but I'm not going to be too focused on creating content on that site. Like, I think that's gotten a lot less valuable. And now the question would be like, okay, I'm just going to go really hard on Instagram. And like, that's going to be where I am making almost everything. And I'm just going to focus on trying to drive sales directly from Instagram. Like it's no longer try to get them to your site, to get them on your newsletter or whatnot. It's like try to go straight from the engagement on the app to buying the product, right? Like on my Instagram, I don't even link to my newsletter as my link in bio because I don't want that barrier of go to my newsletter and then buy my book. Like I don't care about getting that email subscriber anymore. All I care about is that you go buy my book. And so I'm going to send somebody like straight to the Amazon page. And this is actually something where I kind of like disagree with some of the traditional like self-publishing advice, because you read a lot of stuff about self-pub and they say, when you're promoting your book or doing ads or whatever, like don't send people to Amazon because you can't track if it succeeded or not. Send them to your own page where they can join your newsletter, or they can buy the book directly from you, or where you can then like link out to the book, but get them on your site first so you can capture that traffic. And in my head, I'm like, that's stupid because 98% of these people are just going to buy it on Amazon anyway. And it doesn't matter if you can't track the conversion. Like you should just send them there anyway and assume that Amazon is going to have a higher conversion than whatever your flow through would be. Because you just want to like remove as many of those barriers to buying as possible. And I do think that email in particular has become like a major barrier. People don't want to put their email address into things anymore. And the more you push for that, I think the more you actually like hurt the ultimate conversion on what you really want, which is a sale.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great to hear. It is different tacts than I think people are used to. And of course, you mentioned like self-publishing and some of the gurus. I'm using air quotes. I don't know. Yeah. People that teach this, I mean, of course, if that's what they've been teaching for a while, it's hard to, you have a lot of content around that. It's hard to break out. So like, yeah, it's kind of like also thinking about the landscape of the content you're consuming, I guess, and understanding some of the motivation of where that's coming from and things that have worked in the past don't necessarily work now. I thought that you did something pretty creative with your launch for this book. You offered a signed copy with a physical copy, I believe. Yeah. Which was, and just like an honest, and I think this is another thing to just like, hey, like, we know that authors get more support if you're buying directly. it's just like that humanity, I guess. It's not like pushing it, but it's just being real, like, hey, this is, here's an option, but if you find the convenience on like buying it on Amazon, go ahead.
Totally.
I like that approach.
Yeah. And I think people are looking for it more now too. I've noticed this on Bookstagram that people get excited about buying directly from the author instead of buying from Amazon. Like they're willing to pay a little bit extra for the shipping and wait a couple extra days to support the author directly. And, I make like twice as much profit per book if you buy it directly from me as if you buy it from Amazon. So it's a pretty meaningful difference from a business perspective. And so even though this is like the first book and my bookstore looks pretty empty right now, I just wanted to start that right away because I think that it's something that's going to pay dividends as I grow my like fiction portfolio. And I wanted to start figuring out the logistics now when it's a book or two a day before, hopefully it's 100 books a day or, something like that in the future. And so, yeah, for the launch, for the pre-orders, I didn't push the pre-orders on Amazon. You can pre-order it on Amazon if anybody wants to, but what I pushed was buying the pre-orders directly from me. And to make it a little bit more interesting, the way I have it set up is that for the price of a hardcover, so for the price of what the hardcover will be at launch, you get a signed hardcover as well as the audiobook and the ebook. So you're getting all three formats for the price of just the hardcover. It's something you can't do on Amazon. I can only offer it directly through my site. And you're getting a signed one to boot. So it's, I think, a really fun bundle, a really nice like incentive to pre-order. And there's going to be a limited number of them. I think I'm only doing 500. So, I figured out, okay, I'll try this out for this launch. And then hopefully subsequent ones get kind of like bigger and bigger. And I'm doing more and more pre-sales that way. And it's pretty great. It's like I announced it at the end of March and it's pre-sold like 220 copies so far on my site, which, doesn't sound like a crazy number, but for a debut novel, that's like really good. It's a lot actually, especially considering no one's ever read any fiction from me before. So they're really just trusting that I figured this out. And financially, that's like a $5K, $6K profit, which again, not like crazy numbers, like much lower than the course, but for, again, debut novel pre-sales, it's like really good. It's really meaningful. And so I'm just going to kind of like keep playing with that and keep seeing how I can improve that side of the business too.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing the numbers as well and just being transparent about that. Yeah. I think that's, again, the experimental lens. And the last thing on launches that I wanted to just point out for people listening is that, the Twitter tactic and whatever tactics it was still essentially a pre-sale, right? You were really talking about, hey, or really tuned into like what's resonating with people, what do they want? And then I'll create that for them, as opposed to being in your own head and just trying to create something that you hope people will buy. But you can't really do that with fiction writing, I guess. You have to create the story and then, hope people are going to buy it, buy into the story and the world. You have a lot of, I appreciate sort of like counterintuitive advice, let's call it. You bring a lot of interesting perspectives on a variety of topics through your writing and the Substack and everything. I'm just curious for you personally, what were maybe a few, or either that you've gotten yourself, pieces of counterintuitive advice that you found really powerful, or that you came to a conclusion about and wrote about that you would like to share with people today?
I was thinking about this one recently because I'm at the phase now where I have 2 young kids, third one's coming soon, and a lot of my friends are starting to have kids. And there was definitely a message that I got a lot when I was in my early 20s that it'll be easier and safer to start doing something like entrepreneurial or start doing something like fiction writing or whatever once you're older and have some more savings and have a bit of a base established and, have a little bit more security under you. And I think that is actually pretty bad advice because like it's almost hard to imagine how much more complicated life gets and how much more like
amen, brother. Amen.
Yeah. and how much more like logistically challenging and expensive and all of this stuff. And it's actually way easier to try to do some of these things when you like don't have money and when you don't have responsibilities and when you don't have that like safety net or have things figured out, because the downside is like so much lower. Whereas, now, thankfully I have like a good financial cushion from my other stuff, and I have options I can fall back on, heaven forbid the writing doesn't work out. But like, I've got preschool to pay for, and I've got a mortgage, and I've got, like life is a lot more complicated now than it was when I was first trying to figure this stuff out 10 years ago. And if I was just trying to figure it out today, I don't think that I would have it'd be a lot harder to have the time and the confidence and the security to actually go after it. And I've seen this in a number of my friends recently where they started trying to do something kind of entrepreneurial in their early 30s and ultimately had to abandon it because they didn't start it early enough for that flywheel to get going where it could support their family, and they had to make the responsible decision to like let it go and take the more reliable income source. And and that's definitely the right decision. I'm not being critical at all. Like that's absolutely what they should do. And it's like it doesn't work out for most people if you try to work for yourself, but it's actually a lot easier, I think, to get it to work and to have the runway, have the time to make it work if you start much earlier, like before you're ready and before you can quote unquote afford to do it. And I kind of had a hunch that this was true when I was graduating college, and that's what made me comfortable for going a normal job to do this stuff. But I didn't realize just how true it was. And so I think it really is valuable to just like start this stuff before you're ready, right? Because like there never is that magical day when you do realize like, oh, I'm ready to do this now. Like you kind of just eventually either get passionate or frustrated or whatever enough that you start doing it. And you can only really figure it out by doing it, by like getting the reps in, by getting the time under the curve. And so just like never getting in your head that you need to be ready before trying this stuff, and instead just like diving into it and figuring it out. It's maybe trite advice, but I really didn't realize just how true it was until the last couple of years. And yeah, it's like there's part of me that's like, man, I wish. It's like I had a hunch when I was maybe 25 that I really wanted to do book writing, and I kind of abandoned it to like make money doing other things faster. And I was like, well, I'll make a bunch of money doing this other stuff, and then I'll come back to writing books. And like, I love my life. I don't really have any regrets, but like that was probably the wrong decision, because if I had focused on the book writing starting then and like found out that I enjoyed fiction writing back then and had 5, 6, 7 years of that under my belt right now, like this would be easier.
Yeah.
So
right. Who knows what world would be created now? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And again, it's like I don't really regret that decision because I'm very happy with how my life has turned out. But there is that element of like, oh, I thought it would be easier if I waited to focus on writing until later. But that type of career has such a long time to compound and start to take off that the sooner you start and the sooner you take it seriously, the more likely you are to succeed.
Yeah, it's the Chinese proverb, like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today, or whatever they say. There's also the invisible flywheel, I think. You mentioned the flywheel of, like in book writing terms, let's say you would have a catalog, right? There's like a practical sort of thing that exists. But I think one of the biggest things for me, like you mentioned your friends that kind of dropped out. And again, that's not like dropped out of entrepreneurship. And again, that's like I can understand that choice. It's not easy. But I think the reason why I personally have kept going is because the invisible flywheel of getting used to like being scared, but doing stuff anyway. and just building the muscle of like putting stuff out there and then like seeing when you fail that life goes on and you can make something else. And then, hopefully that works. And you just like, that's a whole other part of this, like the whole the sneaky self-development stuff that you don't get into entrepreneurship necessarily for self-development, but you get hit in the face with so many different things that you have to, in order to keep going, you have to kind of get past like a lot of mindset barriers. At least I have had to.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. And like you said, you kind of just have to like do it. and you get used to the uncertainty and you get used to being scared and you get used to the fluctuations in income or whatever, but it takes a long time to get used to it. And I mean, even now I'm still not fully used to it. It's like, I think about that all the time, right? Of like, well, should I just abandon this and, go do like tech sales for Salesforce or something, right? Because it would have that stability and that certainty, and I could probably make a lot of money doing it. But there is the invisible flywheel. There's the visible flywheel. It's like a lot of these things just take a very long time to compound into something powerful, and you just have to have that patience.
Yeah. I'm going to get some book recs before I let you go.
Yeah.
I wanted to add one more thing onto this dialogue because you wrote an article called Avoiding the Prep Trap, a key to rapid learning. And I feel like this ties in with what we're talking about, because if you do want to start, if somebody's like fired up after that, it's just like, yeah, I get what Nat's saying. Like I'm going to get started on this X, Y, or Z thing, or what if it's planning a trip or a business or whatever this week. I feel like some of the advice you shared in this article could help people out. Do you want to just share what that is and some thoughts around that?
Yeah. It's kind of like what I was saying a little bit ago about how you only get prepared by doing it. You can't really prepare beforehand. And I think a good mistake a common mistake people make is they want to start a business. And so they read all these entrepreneurship books and they read all these marketing books. And the problem with that is that you don't really know what's useful in those books until you've had some experience and you've tried things. And then you can point to stuff in the book and you can say, oh, that would be really helpful in this situation or with this problem that I'm encountering right now. If you're trying to just download all the information beforehand, it doesn't really like have anything to tie onto. And so you're basically just procrastinating. And so you really want to figure out like, okay, what is the minimum viable amount of preparation I can do before I actually just start trying to do the thing? And then I can resolve roadblocks as I go, right? It would be like if you wanted to run a marathon or something, the first thing you should do isn't to like make a plan and get new shoes and figure out what running clothes to buy and do all of that. Like you should just go outside and go for a run, right? Like you probably have a pair of shoes that you can wear. So just like go outside and see if you can run 3 miles and like see if you can run 4 miles, right? Like get that data first before you dig into any of the research or the planning or what stretching routines or whatever to do. Like you'll hit a wall eventually where your legs stop letting you keep running. And like, then you can figure out stretching. You don't need to figure it out beforehand. Right. And I think just getting in that habit of, diving in, getting your feet wet, figuring out the cheapest, quickest way to get started so that you can then collect the data so that you know what problems you need to solve is just going to accelerate your learning and your progress so much more than trying to figure out what to do before you get started.
Okay. If anybody pulls their hamstring, get in touch with no.
You can blame me. Yeah, I can send you the stretches that worked for me. I solved my shin splints. So that was a fun journey. So
the shin splints journey. Your next memoir. All right. We've never talked about time travel. This is a travel podcast. Yeah, I'd love to hear. I love time travel books. So I thought I'd get your, 1 or 2 favorite time travel books. And then also just I know you love to share information about books. I love getting book recommendations from you as well. Like I read Flowers for Algernon based on your recommendation earlier this year, and I just love that book.
So good.
Yeah. So what an incredible piece of writing. That book was so creative and so well done. Definitely would recommend that one. Yeah. So any like book recommendations here or resource recommendations on that note? Would love to get some from you.
Yeah, I'll toss a few out. You mentioned time travel, and it's funny. I love time travel movies, but I had a hard time coming up with a good time travel book recommendation. And so it's on my list actually to go read some more good time travel books. But Cloud Atlas was one that like really came to mind. It's not technically time travel, but it has time travel elements where it's sort of like a love story that takes place across 5 different periods of time. So like pre-civilization, early civilization, like 1800s, present day, and far future, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's like the same 2 characters recurring throughout time and how their relationship develops over time. And the way the story is told, it starts in the past and then it jumps forward to the future as it goes through these eras of time, and then it returns to the past to like resolve the story. So it's a really, really cool storytelling style, and you know, really interesting settings. It was just a very beautiful book. So that one comes to mind. And there's a good movie too with Tom Hanks, I think.
The Stephen King 11/22/63. I got to put a plug in for that, man. I've read it twice now. It takes you back to the 50s, like in such a visceral way. And I'm not going to say too much about it, but if you like time travel, I would recommend that one.
If you want a time travel movie recommendation, I think my favorite is Primer. Have you watched that one?
Really? You're not going to go back to the future there? I mean, I guess. No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. Okay. So Primer is the most confusing movie that you'll probably ever watch. It is a wild time travel movie. And I think the most impressive thing about it was that it's an indie film on like a $4 million budget, and which gives it this kind of over the shoulder Blair Witch Project feel. And did you watch Tenet, the Christopher Nolan film? Okay. So I also love Tenet. I think Tenet gets an unfair rep. I think it's fantastic. And, you know, Christopher Nolan did like Batman and Inception and all of those movies. And this is his time travel movie, or his most time travel-y movie. And it's very trippy and really cool. I really, really like it. And Primer is like Tenet on steroids for anybody who's watched Tenet. I don't even really know how to describe it. Basically, these 2 guys figure out how to create a time machine in like a fairly low fidelity setting. It's basically like a box in a storage unit, but it can only take you back in time to when the machine was turned on. So you have to turn the machine on and then leave it, and then you can later go get in it and go back to when it was turned on. And so the whole movie is taking place over the course of like a couple of weeks with multiple loops back on top of each other, and more of these guys interacting with one another. And you never really know which part of the timeline you're on or which one of the characters you're following. And so you've got to watch it like 5, 6, 7 times to start to get a grasp on like what the hell you just watched.
I mean, one cool thing about writing fiction, I would say, is that I'm sure, like, I've gotten this through playing music, is just that it levels up your appreciation for the art form. Because you just, you really understand how difficult it is. And then you see somebody else doing something and you're just like, wow, like that. I don't know how did they do that? Or how did they think of that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, or that's an interesting approach. Like, I never thought to approach it that way. I love that about, I guess, pursuing a craft just for the sake of doing it, you know?
Absolutely. I'll mention, this is a really popular recommendation. I mean, it's one of the best sci-fi novels ever written, Hyperion. Have you read it?
I don't think I have. No. I've heard about it. I've definitely heard of it.
Yeah. Hyperion's cool because it's set far future, spaceships and everything. And it's the story of these 6 people going to see what's kind of like a god on another planet. And the god can basically grant one wish to a pilgrimage of travelers, but only one of them gets their wish fulfilled and all the other ones get killed. But each of these people have like a very important reason to go see this god, because each of their pasts have like intersected with it in some meaningful way. And they all have very different backstories. And most of the book is set on their pilgrimage, but the bulk of the book is each of them telling each other their story about how they interacted with this god and why they came on this pilgrimage. So it's kind of like 6 short stories that come together to create the book. And each of the short stories is from a very like opinionated narrator with a very distinct voice and with a very different like style to it. And so from a literary perspective, it's so impressive because the author just nails each of these characters and each of their voices and each of their storytelling styles, but it's one writer. And you really feel like you're in each of these characters' worlds. And you don't feel the like author's writing style very much at all, which is really, it's just so impressive. And like one of them is, this like shoot 'em up action story. Another one is this just like incredibly tragic parenting story. They're all beautiful in their own ways, and just, cool world that it's all set in.
That sounds like definitely one to add to the list. You studied philosophy in college. I feel like you are using your degree very much. I
mean, that's what I've loved about Husk and, the Meru Initiative and like that whole world is it has this very strong philosophy of mind undercurrent to it, right? Like, what is consciousness exactly? Like, what is the mind-body relationship? Like, and that's a really core theme throughout the books. And it's been really fun to get to like lean on that and use that and bring it into the books, because it's a little bit of my like, I don't know, maybe a bit of what can distinguish me from the other sci-fi on the market, in the sense of, Husk is written like a techno thriller. It's very fast paced. I don't think it's very hard to get through, but it occasionally detours into these like philosophy discussions that I'm sure some people will skip over, and that's fine, right? Like, I like having them in there because that's part of what makes it fun for me. And you don't see as much of that in that pace of book. And so, like maybe that's not smart from a business and marketing sense, but like I love thinking about that stuff and talking about it. And I think it can also create a bit of a differentiation from the rest of the market too.
I really like that part about it, actually. And it felt to me like, just knowing you, it felt to me like you were putting dialogue to characters that would be like maybe 2 characters in your mind that you would have like your own philosophical debate about, but you were just putting it into the meat of the story and making that an essential element of it. And to me, that adds like a greater, it adds more food for thought, I suppose. Where do you want people to go? But where do you want to send people with this? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, go to Amazon and search for Husk, maybe Husk Eliason, and you'll find it and you can order it there, or you can order it directly from me at huskbook.com. And that'll take you straight to the landing page on my store for the book. And it's out May 27th. Do you think it'll be out before then or after?
Time will tell.
Time will tell. Okay. Either way, those two ways of finding it will still work. So
yes, we'll make sure that people can find it with the links in the show.
Grab a copy of the book. And for everything else, just blog.nateliason.com or Nat Eliason on X, Substack, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you prefer to consume things instead of email. I'm probably there.
Yeah. Congratulations, man. We'll make sure to link up to everything there. We didn't talk too much travel today outside of time travel, so I will ask for one more thing. People come to Austin. It's a very popular place to visit. Where should they go? Where should they get tacos? Maybe that would be the number one. Where do you send people when they go to Austin? And not just to the tourist spots, like that might be obvious, but where do you tell people to go?
Yeah, so I'd say if you want breakfast tacos when you're here, which is, like a staple, there's a spot called La Santa Barbacha. And it's a food truck that does barbacoa tacos. And so they barbacoa is basically the only meat that they do. And they just do an incredible job of it. And they have the most amazing barbacoa migas breakfast tacos. And so I'd say go there for breakfast. And then there's another spot called De Nata Cantina. And I'd say go there for dinner and margaritas because their tacos are incredible. And it's like pretty easy to get a table. It's fast paced. There's spots like Suerte, right, that are amazing, but you've got to have a reservation. It's more sit down, more formal. So those would be my top two taco picks. And then if you want like a fun, divey local bar that's still like a nice, cool experience, I'd definitely check out Whistler's, also on the east side. It's like a 100-year-old stone building that they converted into this cool, moody, dim lit bar. And there's a mezcal speakeasy upstairs that they don't advertise. And so you just kind of like go outside and go up this like rickety staircase. And then there's an incredible tiny like 12-seater mezcal bar up there
Nice.
that you can sit in at.
Cool. I remember one spot I don't remember if it was a truck. They had a ukulele hanging there, and if you played like a song on the ukulele, you would get a free taco or something. I can't remember. This is very Austin. Cool. Well, thanks so much for your time. Do you want to leave us with a quote or a little bit of some words of wisdom, or how do we close this one out, Nat? I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you have like a quote you're living by right now, or a mantra or anything? I don't know if that's part of your creative flow.
The one that I've been thinking about the most that we've touched on in a few different ways is just like the best, biggest, most rewarding things often have like very slow upstart times, very long compounding. And you kind of have to not get distracted by the quick wins that you might see on the internet and be willing to like put that time in to get to those big compounding rewards. And it's like, if you're not willing to kind of do the thing in obscurity for 5 to 10 years before it takes off, then maybe that's just not the thing that you should be focused on at all. And I'm just trying to keep coming back to that and not expect things to take off immediately and just keep working hard at them, doing the best I can to get that compounding going, but also having the patience and the confidence that sticking with it for a long time will bring those results.
Back to where we started, patience, right?
Patience.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Jason.
There you have it. Special thanks to Nat Eliason for stopping by the show. Love chatting with him and look forward to having him on again. Of course, all the links in the show notes. I'm going to leave you with a quote in a second. First, I do want to remind you, we have a newsletter, zerototravel.com/newsletter, free to sign up, and it goes out once a week. So if you haven't joined the community over there, please do so you can keep up with all of the latest and greatest happening at Zero to Travel, and a lot happening behind the scenes, which we love to share in the newsletter as well. Give you a little peek behind the curtain, as they say. Okay. Now, I promised at the top I would share with you a way I recently discovered, in fact, just the other day, how to see your town with fresh eyes as a traveler would. And it's very simple. It was a great reminder for me. I had some good friends coming to town, my friends Heidi and Lich, and we went downtown into Oslo, and I took them out to see some things. We went to the top of the Opera House. We went to Vigeland Park, saw some of the sights. And I was just really paying attention to what they were saying and what they were noticing. And they were just noticing so many things that either I haven't noticed, I overlooked, or maybe even just forgot to take a moment to see. When you're living somewhere, you can take your own hometown for granted, and it's fun to go around with some people that are visiting and just pay attention and notice the things that they notice. And you begin to kind of see some of the places you've been maybe a million times with fresh eyes. So it was just really fun. So anyway, if that sounds fun to you, invite a friend or family member from out of town, take them around and just pay attention, and perhaps you will walk away with some new ideas or perspectives around your own hometown. At the very least, you might get that fun feeling, that travel buzz for a day being a tourist in your own town and seeing it through somebody else's eyes. I'm going to leave you with a quote on this one. I don't know if this is an uplifting quote, but when I was thinking about Nat's book and the post-apocalyptic world, a song by John Craigie came to mind. Actually had the pleasure of having John Craigie on the show before, one of my favorite songwriters, and he has a song called I Wrote Mr. Tambourine Man. And in the chorus, he says this: "When the apocalypse is over, I hope you like your job. Ain't it a shame nobody sets anybody free anymore?" So perhaps that second line is a downer, but it's a great song. So I wanted to mention that and give John Craigie a shout out for anybody that likes the singer-songwriter type and some creative songwriting. Check him out, and you can listen to my episode with him as well if you'd like. But I can't end on that because we always end on a more positive note, I guess. So I'm going to share a quote about starting before you're ready, something we talked about today. This one from the always eloquent, the always succinct, the always clever Mark Twain, who said, "The secret of getting ahead is getting started." And that idea of starting before we're ready, I'm in the middle of a project right now that's scaring the heck out of me almost daily. But, I wasn't ready for all the challenges, and I never could have been. And that's just the way it goes. And I have to remind myself of that sometime, that there's a lot of value in starting before you're ready and dealing with all the messy stuff. And all of this has value, even if it feels uncomfortable in the moment. So I'll leave you with that. And I'll leave you with a challenge to start something now, even if you don't feel ready. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.